We said we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. I'm not in a hurry, so we can stay and answer questions as long as your schedule permits. But we're delighted to be here with you today and hopefully to give you something of value in your education.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one of the things that we didn't cover during your introduction was that you're a graduate of the first class from the United States Air Force Academy. And that's an amazing accomplishment considering it's the youngest service now, and it still is changing. Unlike the United States Military Academy, Naval Academy, who are pretty entrenched, right? The United States Military Academy has been around since 1802, and so it's just great to be able to hear that you're a part of that first class. So my first question is linked to the service academies, and every service academy has a honor code of some sort. And if I may, I'll just brief the United States Air Force Academy Honor Code. And it reads, "We will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate any among us that does." There's also an honor oath as well. It reads, "We will not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. Furthermore, I reserve to do my duty and to live honorably, so help me God." Like I said, the United States Military Academy has the same, and so does the United States Naval Academy. Of interest to this group here is how did those things help, those honor codes help your ethics or shape your ethics or help you with ethical decision making in business?
Well, BYU has an honor code, and I've got a copy of it, I think, somewhere here in my bag. And most institutions have some sort of an honor code, and they are quite variant. I was surprised. I gave a talk just recently, BYU Honor Week, the keynote address on honor, and so I've done a little bit of research on it, and I was surprised how different the honor codes are. West Point and Air Force Academy are virtually identical in their words and in their administration. I was the exec for honor and ethics at the Air Force Academy for a couple, 3 years, and so I was responsible for the teaching and the administration of it. So I've spent a lot of time on honor codes. But what did I get out of it as a cadet? The average, my classmate, we graduated 205, I think, in 1959. And if you went back to those that are still alive and said, what was the most impactful aspect of the Air Force Academy on your life? 95% of them would say living under the honor code for 4 years. And I would say that same thing, under the honor code, because we didn't. And if you saw somebody that did, I had a classmate that left on an honor violation because one of our classmates had seen him change a C to a D after cease work had been given, and he was gone. You grew up under it, and it was taught in such a way, administered in such a way that it became an integral part of your character. I don't lie, cheat, or steal. Now, when I went there and they showed me this, I said, I don't lie, cheat, and steal. I didn't lie, cheat, and steal in high school or junior high school. It just was how I was raised in the church and in my home. The impact of the honor code was a little bit less because where I started, right. I was committed to honorable behavior before I started. But it reinforced it and gave some new understandings of it, of the importance of it. And it gave it an institutional. My classmates counted on me to be honest. I knew that. I counted on them to be honest. We went to war. In every one of my assignments, but one, subsequent assignments in the Air Force for 35 years, there was one of my classmates that was assigned with me. Wow. Not to watch over me, but it just happened that way, and so we were a tight-knit band, right. Those 200 that graduated, and we counted on each other. And I went to war with them, and I counted on them, especially in war. When I got shot down, both times, I had an indication of a problem. Well, one time, I had a fire warning light. I said, 2. And he was my wingman. He came upside and he said, you're burning badly. And he was right there with me. And when I jumped out, he was right over me until the Army helicopter came by and picked me up. The second time I got shot down, I didn't have to bail out. But I said, but my wingman came up alongside to join up, and he said, "You're bleeding badly." And I had been shot right on takeoff in a main fuel line, about a 2-inch pipe pumping, and my wingman was there. So we were a tight-knit team for survival.
Yes, sir.
And so that was, that became part of my honor understanding. I'm in this for me and for them.
Right.
And so that's what it meant to me. It's a long answer to your question.
No, sir, I think we can all appreciate that, because the only time I've been in an aircraft, sir, is either when I'm traveling somewhere or they're dropping me out to go do a combat operation. So,
Yeah.
so I think the fighter pilot perspective helps us understand. To relate to everybody else in our program, how has that shaped how you did business, how you conducted yourself in business?
Well, I was honest, and I knew I was honest, and I was going to remain honest no matter what came up. And so when my boss at US Airways would ask me something, I hope he knew he was going to get my best honest answer, because I knew that's what I was going to give him.
Absolutely.
So I didn't think a lot about it. That's just what I was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's great, sir. The reason why I wanted to hone on ethics.
Let me
Yes,
say
sir.
something else
Please,
while
please.
we're on that business. And I think the first lesson that any business student or any student should take away from their college education is, I'm expected to be honest. And integrity is a key aspect of what people hire me for. And that's not just a BYU truism.
Right.
That's true. I am the boss, and you hired me to be the boss, and I'm going to tell you the honest answer to the best of my ability.
Absolutely.
And that's what's expected. And if you don't like that, if you don't understand that, go back and study, read stuff, because that's what will be expected. And we could talk all day about business examples where failure to survive in leadership positions in large or public or private institutions and organizations, integrity is baseline expect. Not always there, but it's really generally there. And if it's not there, somebody is in a very vulnerable position.
Right. Absolutely, sir. You hit on a word that is near and dear to my heart, given my current capacity. But you talked about leadership and leadership in business. I almost see your life divided up into 3 phases. So there's your time at the academy, there's your time as a military professional, and then there's your time in business. Real quick, can you talk about just some of those changes, or how you maybe had to change your leadership style in each one of those 3 phases?
Let me just not talk about the cadet thing, because the cadet thing is so encapsulated and unique, and most people aren't going to experience it. I tried not to act any different in my military and in my US Airways time and in my general authority time in the church. The principles of leadership are the principles of leadership, and they're based on how you treat people and how you conduct yourself. And I don't think there's a difference. There wasn't in my mind. I didn't conduct myself differently, I don't think.
Okay. That's almost a selfish question, right? I talked to you before about in a couple years I'm about to change professions, and so my answer was almost going to be the same. The person that I am right now and how I lead, it may be nuanced, but I would say that the essentials are still the same. So
you're going to find out, just a natural thing. You'll go to your boss and say, what do you want me to do?
Right.
Give me a job description, and how do you want me to act? And if he wants you to act distinctly different than you are, you're probably better off saying, well, I don't think this job is for me, because I am this. And I treat people thoughtfully and kindly and honestly. And if that doesn't fit in with your style, okay. We have a son that retired recently from the military as a colonel. And he got a very good job with a local company here. But he didn't stay very long because they didn't treat him like he was expecting to be treated. That is to say, they were continually looking over his shoulder. And he had another job opportunity for what turned out to be a significantly better job come along. But he took it because he didn't like the atmosphere of the one environment and the way they treated him. And he just didn't fit. He was never going to be happy there. Well, that's another long answer to your question.
Sir, long
We
answers
probably
are
got
fine.
time for one more question.
Sir, long answers are fine. My last question applies to everybody in this room. Considering that we're in this program, this means that we're going to change jobs. We are all going to change professions in the near future just because of advancement. What was the secret to your success when it came to transitions? You went through, 3 pretty big ones. And so what are some key takeaways as you make the transitions, as you continue to rise in your profession? What are the keys to that success? And then how did you find balance between family and work?
Let me answer the last question.
Please, sir.
Balance family and work. It's a matter of your priorities, and you set your priorities. And you ought to set your family priorities with your spouse. And your spouse should know that they are never going to be second class or second on your list of priorities. Your family priorities are top, and you should act like they're top. And that's not always easy. In the military, for example, we have 6 children, and they were young, they were compact, the bundle, and I didn't have a lot of family time, and I had to fight. And I didn't always do it right. I'm not proud of that. But I came around to the point where we gave family priority. But when I was at the Naval War College as a student, I was coaching Little League Baseball, an assistant coach, and that was hard. And I've got one son that to this day thinks that I didn't give my family enough priority. But I was coaching his baseball team, but you have to do. I love to play golf, but I went for several years, I'd play golf once a year on some office thing because there just wasn't time. I was working when I was in the Pentagon. I would get home around 1 o'clock on Saturday, and I'd leave the house at 6:15 or 6:30 and go to the Pentagon, and I'd get home 8 o'clock at night. And there wasn't much family time left there. Right. And I said, I got to do better. So I tried, but I didn't try soon enough and hard enough. So it's something you just make what time you can. I coached then men could coach the young women's basketball team in the church. And I was a basketball coach, but I didn't do that very well because I was getting home at 8 o'clock at night from the Pentagon.
Right.
And so you just do what you can, but the first thing is set your priorities. My family's at the top of my priorities, but I obviously did well enough that I don't think my boss always knew I hope he didn't, but if he did, he did. But I would.
Doesn't matter now.
It doesn't matter now, but it shouldn't have mattered then. And if I would say to him, "Hey, in fact, I did this. I'd say, my son's got a baseball team tonight. I'm going to leave early, and so I'd leave at 5 o'clock, and that was quite early. You have to set your priorities, and then live by your priorities. Set them with your spouse. Set them with on your knees. And then live by them.
Absolutely.
And make sure your boss knows what your priorities are actually, because then when you walk in and say, I've got to go to a son's baseball game tonight, I say, okay. But it's not easy.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
But so that was the second part of a.
That was,
What
sir.
was the first part of the question?
I wasn't going to bring it up, but I'll bring it up again, sir. Absolutely. Transitions.
Okay.
So we're all going to go through some transitions sometime soon. And how did you handle those? And what was the secret behind your success for these life-changing transitions that you've had?
Well, I didn't have a choice to stay in. I had my 35 years in, and the Air Force was kicking me out.
Okay.
And so I knew I had to find a new job. And I went and got a headhunter. And after I looked around, and I thought people would come. I knew Europe. I'd been there a lot. And I thought somebody'd come knocking on my door. Nobody came knocking on my door. I was still in Europe. And so I went and got a headhunter. And he looked at me and my resume, and he said, well, you ought to be an athletic director of a university. Nobody wanted me for that job. So a friend called me up and said, hey, they need you. They need this job at US Air. Are you interested? And I said, sure. I went down and talked. So networking is important.
Yeah.
That people know you're looking for a job. Know what kind of job you'd like. But be flexible. Don't say, I want to be the senior vice president for operations at US Airways. It won't work like that.
Right.
So you just figure out generally what kind of job. And people will say, the first thing they'll say, what kind of job you're looking for? And you say, I'm ready to work hard. Mm-hmm. I'd like a job associated with flying or not. And then you tell people, but networking around with your friends is important.
So we talked about the Air Force, 35 years. They kicked you out after becoming a 4-star general. So that's a blessing. Transition then into retirement. What was that like for you? Retirement from US Airways and transitioning into a general authority.
US Air was reorganizing and they were downsizing a little bit. And they said, Oaks, thanks, goodbye. Ouch. And so I left there and was kind of walking the streets, and I got a call from President Hinckley. And he said, can we send you someplace around the world?
Was this an expected call, sir?
Oh, no.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
In fact, my wife and I were sitting in our library, and she answered the phone and said, it's President Hinckley's secretary. I was a stake president at the time, and we had a case, and I figured he wanted to talk about a restoration of blessings. So I picked up the phone to talk about a restoration of blessings, and he didn't want to talk about that. He said, how's your testimony? And I said, it's good. He said, how's your wife's testimony? I said, it's better. And he said, how's your health? And I said, well, I've got cancer. And he asked, what's your PSA? And I told him, he said, oh, you're better off than most of us. And so we just went on from there. And he said, we'd like to send you somewhere around the world to serve as a 70. I said, okay. And we put our house up for sale the next day in Pittsburgh. And the next day we were in Salt Lake.
Wow.
Getting trained. Went back home in Pittsburgh, and our house sold in about 3 weeks. And there were houses in our area that had been on the market for a couple of years. So we were richly blessed, and we went off to Johannesburg, South Africa, and lived for 3 years.
Wow.
So that was a fast transition.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seemed as though just from what you described, all of them have been seamless. And I think all of us can only be so lucky if we're in those positions. But if there's one attribute or one or underlying attribute to it all, it's probably preparedness. It sounded as though you and your wife were prepared the whole time with each transition, except for the time that you're out on the street as a 4-star general.
Well, you're prepared sometimes when you don't know it. You're not prepared. That's an interesting question. Let me give you my interesting answer is, I was on my way from my home to the church to a meeting for a stake presidency meeting, and I was riding along, and I was listening to the Tabernacle Choir, and they sang, I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord. And I was retired by then, and I thought, I've always gone where the Air Force sent me. and I thought consciously, Lord, I'm ready to go where you want me to go. And about 2 or 3 days later, I got the call from President Hinckley. But it was a conscious decision. I'm ready to go where you want me to go, dear Lord. And I was. It was a commitment. It was a change from mine. I'd gone where the Air Force sent me. And now, all of a sudden, I was getting orders from a different place.
Right. That's awesome, sir. Thank you very much. I'm glad you cut it off right there. I'm going to open it up to questions to the rest of my my colleagues here, if you guys have any. We can do the raise your hand thing, and then we can go from there. Jess, please. Thanks.
I'd like to know one of the stickiest or hardest situations you've been in, and how did you deal with it?
One of the hardest situations I've been in, most painful, was toward the end of I think I already had, I knew I was going to retire from the Air Force. They were done with me. And in the last couple of months, we had 2 helicopters, Army helicopters, in the Middle East, were shot down by 2 of our fighters. And it was obviously a mistake, and a dumb mistake. We did the investigation, and it just proved to be a dumber than I had feared mistake. And there were several people killed, 10-ish were killed, and it was ugly. And there was no clever answer, no justification. It happened. And that was probably my most difficult situation, other than the day I got shot down. But most difficult in a professional way, to come to live with that. I guess that's the best answer. It's not a good answer. It's a painful answer.
Did changes happen, or what
Pardon?
What happened after that? Were there changes? Or?
Well, you make what changes you can to try and make sure it doesn't happen again. But you feel helpless, and you feel totally inadequate, and I was that. And I received, although I had no direct involvement in any of the process, but that I received a verbal reprimand. So I left the service under a verbal reprimand. Had no impact on me other than on my pride and my ego. But I felt what a terrible way to leave the service. Like I say, it had, they didn't, it didn't change anything except how I felt about my tenure.
It takes endurance. You just endure through those hard times, and that's one of the things that I've kind of thought about, like how am I going to be when I finally take this off, right? I'm going to choose to leave the Army. The Army's not going to tell me to go away. And so one of the things that I've learned is that endurance is what, it may leave a sour taste in your mouth, but you just continue to move on. In 1 year I lost 9 men, and that was pretty tough. And every year of the anniversary I write a card to them, but that's part of the endurance process, and enduring through those hard times, getting through those tough situations.
Well, I was glad that I didn't have to make the decision of how to handle all the disciplinary aspects of it. And I wasn't, they gave that to another headquarters. But I was not happy. I wasn't very charitable in my feelings. I would have taken some wings away from people responsible. Probably not smart, but that's where I came to. It was dumb enough that I said I would.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
You gave a talk in general conference about 4 of a bevy of virtues had to do with patience.
Yes.
I was curious what the process was like at preparing, what your thought process was in preparing that talk, and why that subject was what you prepared for.
Thank you. The talk, I talked about charity, and 4 of the items of charity: suffereth long, that's patient, endureth, and 4 of the 7 aspects of charity outlined in Corinthians and in the Book of Mormon focus on patience. And I had just read that, several times, over the course of reading the scriptures. And I said, it doesn't say it. We don't talk about patience that often. But I thought that was meaningful, and charity, without it, you're nothing. And so I just kind of said, I think it needs talking. Now, I will tell you, this is another long answer. I got a letter. I got 3 letters. I talked 3 times. I got 3 letters from signed by I think by the Office of the First Presidency, say, we'd like you to talk in General Conference for 7.5 minutes, and you will follow so-and-so. And that's all you're told. What I learned, I didn't know it when I got my first letter, but you get down on your knees real quickly and say, Lord, what do you want me to talk about? And those talks from conference are from the Lord, the topic, and I think the substance. Now, I'll tell you how I know that for absolute surety. When I got my call from President Hinckley, my second thought was, I'm going to talk in conference. And I spoke in the first conference that was given from the conference center. And I was in Africa, and I got this letter that he says, you talk for 7.5 minutes, and you'll follow so-and-so. Well, when I first got the call, I said, I'm going to talk in conference. What am I going to say? And I started writing that day in my mind what my talk was going to be. And I had a pretty good idea what I was going to talk about. Then I got the letter, and I sat down, and I wrote the first paragraph. And then the second day, I went back to it, and I started writing the second paragraph. And it was an entirely different topic. It didn't flow from the first paragraph at all. But it flew, I knew where it came from. And it came from the Lord, that second paragraph. And it was on missionary work. My paragraph was something entirely different, my talk. And then that night, I had a dream. I had a dream twice, exact same dream. And it was about missionary work. It was about orange juice and missionary work. I just wrote what came to my mind. And I didn't, it wasn't my talk. It was not in my mind. Part of it was out of my dream. So I took it to my secretary the next day and gave it to her. And she said, what's that? And I said, it's my conference talk. She said, you just got the letter. And I said, that's my conference talk. And I sent it in, and it got approved basically how I sent it in. And so there was never a question in my mind where that talk came from. And there's never a question in my mind where any talks come from that I hear at conference. So I'm excited for conference. I'm excited for October. And I'll hear again, like you'll hear, what the Lord wants us to hear, because those are inspired. And you listen, and there's very seldom ever any duplication. And it's not because they get together and say, well, I'll talk about this and you talk about that, Elder Oaks. It's people sit down and they ponder and they pray. Sometimes they'll take 6 months to write one of those talks, but they're doing it under inspiration.
My question is about your decision-making process. You've outlined for us a pretty clear-cut worldview in which you're always honest and you always do what's right.
I try to.
I wonder if there were ever any times where you struggled to know what was the right thing to do. And if so, how you walked through that process, or if they always just came to you as, here's the right thing, and you did it. Did you ever struggle with the decision? And if so, how did you work through it?
Well, obviously I struggled. I'll answer, this will be another long answer. First, when I was commander of the United States, and this is a leadership answer. When I was commander of the United States Air Forces in Europe, the wall came down. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do about NATO? No, there wasn't a plan. The wall came down. Nobody expected the wall to come down. I had the ambassador to Germany from the U.S. at that time, Vernon Walters, great man. And he was at our house for dinner one time, and he said, nobody expected the wall to come down when it came down. Nobody in the State Department was expecting it. It was a total surprise. And he said, I wrote, as the ambassador to Germany, he said, I wrote a paper, and I took it in, and I put it on the desk of the German desk officer at State Department, and it just sat there. And he said that was the only piece of paper in the State Department that said it's about to come down. And he had his logic, and I believe him. He was an honest guy, and I believed him. So the wall came down, and I was commander, and everybody started saying, I had probably 20 different congressional delegations come to my headquarters and say, what are you going to do with NATO now? They didn't say that. They said, here's what we think you ought to do with NATO. And they said, get the troops home. We want our peace dividend, was the term they used. And I briefed John McCain, Patsy Schroeder, and a bunch of others on what should happen. And they wanted the troops out of Europe because there was a lot of money spent in there. They wanted that money back, peace dividend now. And I was convinced and remain convinced that was the wrong answer. You know, we wanted to maintain NATO. It has maintained a peaceful umbrella over Europe for a long time, very effectively. So I sat back for about 3 months, expecting a message from the Pentagon or somebody in Washington, State Department, somebody telling me what to do. I had 82,000 troops in United States Air Forces in Europe. I had 12 wings, 16 main operating bases. What do you want us to do with them? I knew we weren't going to maintain that structure. And I got nothing. I got no information. Finally, one day, and this is the leadership issue, vision is the leader's responsibility. One day I'm sitting there and I'm saying, wait a minute, Oakes, who knows more about what we need here than anybody else? And it better be you. And I looked around and I couldn't see anybody that knew more what the United States Air Force should look like in Europe than me. So I called our two-star numbered Air Force commanders. I had 3 of them, plus our two-star planner. And we had a meeting one day. And we sat down to decide what United States Air Forces should look like in Europe. So I got the people that knew the best, including myself, and these numbered Air Force commanders. What should we do? What should we look like in terms of number of bases, number of troops? And we knew we were going to be allowed to maintain 100,000 U.S. troops in Europe, and about a third of them would be Air Force. And so we, that one day, decided what we should look like, in our mind. And we put together a message and sent it back. That's what it looks like today, 10 years, more than 10 years later. That's what the force structure that we have fought, all the Middle East stuff, all of the Balkan stuff, all the stuff has happened out of that posture that we put together that day. I tell you this story with some embarrassment. It shouldn't have taken me 3 months to call that meeting. It did, and we got it done. But the leader's job is vision, and get the best people around. It wasn't my vision, it was our vision. From the smartest people on these topics, what should we look like? And that's the leader's job. If you're a new guy coming into a job, a new person coming into a job, look around and say, where should this organization be headed? And if it's not headed there, get it headed there and plot it out. And that's the leader's job. First job, job 1, vision. Get the smart people around you. Don't try and do it yourself. Build a team. And that's an important part of this vision. Build a team. And the place to start with is where? yourself. What are my strengths? And I don't want to go out and find a vice commander that looks like me or thinks like me. If I'm a good speaker, I don't want to go find a good speaker. I want to find a good planner. If I'm a good planner, I better go find a good speaker to help me sell it. But you want to build a team that doesn't look like you, a team that complements you. Find what's your biggest weakness. Now, where am I going to find somebody to fill in for my weakness? And so you build a team made up of people that bring all this together so that there is a synergism on this team. And if you have multiple talents, you want to cover all the challenges of the job.
But I thought you'd say, when we got our assignment to go to Europe, how did our family react?
Okay, this wasn't my decision. I was the head of general officer matters when I got promoted to 1-star. Responsible for the assignment and promotion and retirement of general officers. And so my deputy came in and said, okay, you take leave for 2 or 3 weeks and I'll find you a job. And I said, okay. And I was a colonel at the time. I was now BG Select, and he was a lieutenant colonel. And so I took my family and we went out to Utah. And we're sitting there at breakfast around my folks' table, and I get a phone call from my deputy, and he said, hey, I got a job for you. And I said, where's that? And he said, it's the assistant for readiness in Ramstein. And I said, okay, because I hadn't been in operations for a long time, and I knew I was going to be hard to place. And I'd been in the headquarters for several years. So I turned to my family and I said, how does Germany sound? And there was dead quiet. We had 6 kids sitting around there, and there was dead quiet. And then one of our sons, who was probably 8 at the time, he said, you can get Nike shoes in Germany for $10. And all the kids went, yay! And so our decision was based on $10 Nike shoes in Germany. We never found the $10 Nikes. Now that's, of course, a facetious answer. Decision-making process. Prayer is an important part of it. Important decisions, and the Lord will help you make those decisions. The structure, the force structure that I ended up with, that I talked about, we ended up with. I prayed. I think we opened that meeting with prayer. I would do that whenever I felt comfortable, is open meetings with prayer. In fact, let me tell you a funny little story. I was in Las Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base, and I got assigned to be the operations officer in a squadron. And at the same time, exact same time, I was assigned to be a counselor in a bishopric. And so I went to church on Sunday, and we're organizing the ward, this new ward. And so I'm interviewing people, and we're praying about that. And then on Monday, I'd go to work, and I'd interview people and assign them in the squadron. And so on one Monday morning, first interviewee, I called him in, and he came in, and we sat there for a minute. I said, well, will you open with prayer? And he looked at me. Oh, pardon me, wrong day. And but I tell you that is I tried to rely on prayer for inspiration. So that was an important part of the process. And then consider alternatives, and is it going to be, and in all my decisions, I hope, I tried to think, what's good for the individual? So is this a good job for them? What's good for the organization? But a basic thing is, what's good for the organization? Balance. Balance the needs of the organization and the needs of the people. And try and find the solution or the situation, the structure, where the mission of the organization is met and moves forward, and the individuals are helped and blessed. And so that balance is important. Balance for the individual and balance for the organization. And that's a good leadership principle in any, whether you're talking church, whether you're talking military, whether you're talking industry, is what's good for, and you've got to have that balance of I'm going to make this organization move forward and improve. An improvement is important. How can I improve? I always tried to leave an organization better than I found it. And that just gives you a good orientation. Leave it better than you found it. And as I've thought back, basically I was able to do that. Now, let me just, I'm off, is this the third or fifth tangent? Don't change things just to change things. A lot of people do that. I'm new here, I gotta change something, so I'm gonna change it. And change for change's sake is costly, and it's generally counterproductive. Now, I will tell you a little tangent. While I was in the Pentagon, I saw this piece of paper one day, and it said, it was a Russian comment, and it said, better is the enemy of good enough. And I said, that's brilliant, because a lot of people change things just to change things. Better is the enemy of good enough, a Russian philosophy. Then I went to Russia, and I saw the results of that, and they stunk, literally. One time I was giving a talk at the Institute of Technology in Moscow, and they said, when you stand right here, you're standing where Napoleon stood in 1812, watched his army retreating out of Moscow, driven out of Moscow. And so I was quite captured. And then I said, where's the restroom? And some of my guys said, you don't want to go in there, sir. And I did. And it was the worst restroom I've ever seen. And there's some bad restrooms on earth. And it was the worst I've ever seen. I said, that's the product of better is the enemy of good enough. That restroom needed to be a lot better. And it was the same true with their airplanes. Quality. We are dedicated to quality. And you have to put limits on it. But want you constant improvement in reasonable ways. Now that sounds complicated, but you're nodding, so I'll assume you understand it. But you do want to constantly get better. You know, look at our cars out here. They're dramatically better than Model A Fords or Model T Fords because the car makers, people have been demanding better. Sometimes they're better in trivial ways and worthless ways. But constant improvement is good, but within limits. Don't gold plate things. We could go off, spend a lot of time talking that.
So my question comes with a quick story, so I'll be fast. I served my mission when you were the state president in Butler, in Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
And one of the meetings that I went to that you were talking at, you were talking about member visits and how important it was to bring the missionaries into the home and things
Yeah.
like that. And you stated during the meeting, you said, by raise of hand, how many people have been found tracting? Because member visits are so much better bringing missionaries in the home. And most of the congregation raised their hand. And on the spot, you changed and you said, we're going to go with the missionaries out tracting and we're going to find people that way. And we'll still do member visits, but tracting is important. So my question to you is, from a leadership standpoint, why did you change your mind so quickly? I think it's important. Like, I loved it. I've remembered it ever since that you were able to kind of change the meeting and say,
well,
look,
the
we're gonna...
numbers were overpowering. And it's true today. How many in here are a member of the church because of tracting, door knocking of either you or your parents or your grandparents? How many are the fruits of tracting? Okay, that's quite a few. And it's a majority. Every place I'd go do that, a majority would raise their hand, the product of tracting. And so it just demanded a change in my philosophy. You know, the stories are great about member visits, about going and finding people, teaching them in their homes, and member referrals. They're beautiful stories, but there aren't enough of them. And tracting stories more. Now, I think it's a little bit less now. I think it's getting to be, we're refining our process a little bit and getting better at getting members involved. But that's why I changed, because the numbers just demanded. I was wrong. My cute little philosophy was wrong. Okay. Thanks, Faith.
Sir, thank you very much. Definitely appreciate your time here.
Honored to be with you.